So Nedbank has some very happy shareholders, and Xolani, pray tell why.
Thank you very much, Dudu. Yes, indeed, we are following up on Nedbank's annual results and hopefully talking about also the reshuffle and the disappointing GDP data that came out today. Financial services provider and lender Nedbank has declared the highest ever dividend to shareholders and announced a 5 billion rand share buyback targeting shareholders holding less than 100 shares. The company posted double-digit earnings growth across all its businesses in 2022. To talk about this and other developments, we are joined by the Group CEO, Mike Brown. Mike, thank you very much for your time. I want to start with the financial performance, a great performance under trying circumstances when we are seeing load shedding, when we are seeing the Ukraine-Russia war, my apologies, and interest rates, inflationary pressures are being there. How do you characterize the year 2022 for the Nedbank Group?
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. We were certainly very pleased with our performance and be able to demonstrate a strong set of results in, as you say, a very challenging environment. To be able to produce record levels of profits at 14 billion rand, up 20%, and importantly, to have a 14% return on equity and a 14% CET1 capital number, we think shows a very good year-on-year performance. But still, if you look at our ROE at 14%, it remains too low. It's below pre-crisis levels, so we certainly have work ahead to continue to improve that performance.
How have your clients actually performed in 2022 when it comes to their debt levels and their servicing of their debt? Because we know that the cost of living is high and many consumers are financially hard-pressed. How have they been in 2022?
Yeah, it's certainly been a very difficult year for consumers to have to contend with record levels of load shedding, just over 3% increases in interest rates and a sharp increase in inflation. That puts pressure into most people's disposable income. And we've certainly seen a tick up in bad debts in our retail environment primarily, mostly in the home loan and vehicle finance portfolios, which are generally the largest installment that consumers have to deal with.
Mike, let's talk about the outlook for the year 2023. What is going to be, in your viewpoint, the most important parts when it comes to the performance of the group and the financial services sector in particular?
So clearly the overall economic performance of the country is important. And, we certainly think that's going to remain very weak. And we've been very critical about the slow level of reform in key sectors such as energy, logistics and water, alongside poor delivery in municipal services in many places and an unacceptably high level of corruption. So, we, in our results, we're forecasting GDP growth in 2023 of 0.7%. This morning we've revised that down to 0.4%. And I'm sure you saw the very poor Q4 numbers. We're probably likely to have a negative GDP print in Q1. So that'll be 2 quarters in a row of negative GDP, which would trigger a technical recession. So I think it's going to be really, really tough out there. And our job is to remain focused on those things we can control. Managing our collections, managing our bad debts, continuing to provide our clients with the best service. We've just been ranked number 1 on Net Promoter Scores in the country and continuing our digital journey. And we think if we put all of those together, notwithstanding the difficult external environment, we can still grow our headline earnings and improve our return on equity back above 15%.
Let's stick to that GDP story that has shocked the market today. Even your expectations, no one expected a 1.3% contraction. And this actually says that South Africa is facing a possible recession. In that environment, when it comes to even your predictions right now, that Q1 could have a negative print. In your predictions, what should the Reserve Bank's reaction be to that expectation of a Q1 that is contracted and a Q4 2022 that has performed so dismally? So when it comes to Reserve Bank interest rates in a couple of weeks, what should they be focusing on?
Well, I think that if you have to look at the underlying reasons for the poor performance in our economy, and they are not to do with monetary policy, which is the domain of the Reserve Bank. They are to do with the poor performance of those state-owned monopolies that are largely responsible for those network industries of energy, logistics, water that I spoke about earlier. So really what monetary policy is more about is around the trajectory of inflation. And inflation globally feels like it may have peaked, but there's still some risk to the upside. And, I believe that the Reserve Bank would be correct to have one last 25 basis point hike in interest rates, and then we would expect rates from 2024 to begin coming back down again.
Before I let you go, Mike, let's talk about the cabinet reshuffle. There have been a number of people commenting on whether it is a good, mix of leadership that is there. What is your expectation? You interact with a government executive a lot. What is your expectation about what those who have now ascended into new office should actually be doing? Because this is an opportunity for the executive to do the right thing.
Well, we think they should be dramatically escalating the focus on delivering on what we all know is the structural reform required to fix energy and Eskom, logistics and Transnet, and water. And, I think it's too early to tell whether the new ministers will be able to accelerate delivery of that. But the president certainly said that his expectation in appointing them, in particular in the energy and electricity portfolio, is to do just that, to, reduce the levels of load shedding in the short and medium term, and in the long term, eliminate that completely. And, we certainly are going to be watching that very carefully, because that is having a devastating effect on all South Africans.
Mike Brown, thank you very much. He is the CEO, the group CEO at Nedbank Group, sharing his views on the latest quarter 4 GDP numbers when it comes to that contraction of 1.3% and the fact that the bank has actually made that huge stride in their financial performance last year. On that note, it's time for a break.